This next session is going to be on building your practice. Tell us about this recent transition you've gone through in now you're rebuilding your practice now for the second or third time. Tell us how that's kind of that transition and how that's gone.
That sounds really bad. It's not a problem with me, I promise. I've had a couple of transitions in my career. One, the first time, and I've been out for 15 years from fellowship. The first transition was because my husband was recruited to an academic institution. We were in Oregon, and we transitioned to Los Angeles, to USC. And for any of you who have professional spouses, that's always hard to navigate, who takes the driver's seat in a sense, and how do you make a decision whether to move for the growth and growth of one spouse's career versus the other. And it was lucky that both of us actually were being recruited to USC, and our family lives in Los Angeles. So we moved, and I was in the academic institution for quite a long time. Loved working with Jess Berry, Sahar Bedroun, and others at USC. And then, unfortunately, because of political changes happening at the academic institution that I was at, I decided to leave. And leaving after being in academics for 10 years, it was really difficult decision for me to leave and decide to go into private practice. And I had to, in a sense, decide that because the academic arena, at least in the vicinity of my husband's job, if I wanted to move to another state, I could have had amazing opportunities, but I had to really think what I want to do and stay still close to family and my husband. And the opportunity came for me to join a really well-established practice that was different than the Maloney Vision Institute. It was an established practice that was highly academic and private, and basically joined this practice with the intention of becoming partners. But the partnership track wasn't evolving as fast as I was ready to jump in. Again, I had been 10 years out, and I knew what I wanted, and the practice wasn't ready yet for this level of energy. And I think then the opportunity, Dr. Maloney, Robert Maloney has known me for many years, and he had been trying to recruit me year after year. And I came to a fork where it was either opening my own practice or joining his. And so when I started negotiating with him, I basically said, I'm either walking in as a partner and owner of the practice, or I'm going to go out on my own.
Dr. Raviv, tell us about your transition and kind of how your career has led you to where you are today.
Well, thanks for allowing me to be here. I think what all of us you should take from Neta's story of anyone is what we start doing isn't necessarily where we'll end up. There may be many transitions. I think it's actually much more likely than not that you'll not end up where you first went. You may, which is great, but you may not. My first practice, 10, 12, 13 years, I learned I was in a group, and I eventually decided to go on my own about 4.5 years ago, and I had an opportunity to buy a retiring doctor's practice. This was a retiring doctor who had been there for 40 years. He'd referred me all his cataracts, his last 10 years of practice. I had a presence in that office where I was co-managing, so to speak, with him, and I took it over. But when I took over this practice, it was a very old practice, both physically and just the way the practice. I mean, they barely used email, among the secretaries who've been there for 30 years, and I'm coming in, and so I had to transition that to a modern refractive. I'm a refractive surgeon, refractive cataract surgeon, very tech savvy, and we're in the middle of Manhattan, for goodness sakes, where every patient is like that. And so that transformation was something that I took as a challenge, and I enjoyed. I think what was key to being successful, one of them is just knowing how to run a practice. I advise all of you in your first jobs, if you're in private practice and you want to remain that way, learn the business side. Do it for free. Do the management. Figure all that. That's everything. That's your ticket to self-determination, ultimately. So,
Lisa, tell us a little bit about how you've developed and built your practice and some recommendations that you might have for young ophthalmologists going out in their first job or a few years into practice.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me here. I think this is such an important panel for young ophthalmologists to realize that you have a lot of different avenues for practice, and one of the best pieces of advice I can give you to start off with is to carefully think about what type of practice you're looking for, what type of personality you have, what expectations you have, and when you go into the practice, find out what their expectations are too, and make sure that they match. So when I had the good fortune to open up my own practice about 5 years ago now, I was blessed that I came into my dad's office. God bless his soul, was an internal medicine doc. And so I opened up my practice in his office. and we converted part of the office over to ophthalmology, and that's how I started. So my first patients were all his patients who needed eye exams. But then I had to go out and build my own. So I started off with a plate of cookies and my business cards, and I went to the local ophthalmologists, optometrists, primary care docs, and I said, I'm available. I will take care of your patients. I will get them back to you. And here's a cookie. You asked what things I think I would do or what advise when you start building your practice. I think it goes back to those, they call them the 4 A's or the 5 A's. You have to be available, you have to be affable, you have to, there's another A about knowledge, ability. And I think all of these things are really important. You need to prepare yourself now with the proper skills. You need to come in being available to your patients and to the referring docs. And you need to build your practice that you will put the patient first. I think when you start off with that principle and you put the patient first, the rest of it will follow. You will build your practice very well.
Dr. Tao, you're in UC Irvine, as we've discussed, and you have an academic type of oculoplastic practice. How have you developed that practice into the mix of patients that you really want in your patient population and your practice for your personality and your career trajectory?
Yeah, so in academics or any institutionalized, you do have a little bit of an inbuilt practice. However, there's still a lot to build. You don't just show up, no matter where you are, whatever institution. The patients aren't lined up right away. The key thing I want everybody here to take home is gain all the skills. Those of you in training, we are so biased by our mentors. My mentor didn't do very many lasers, for example. Well, whatever it is, you have to go and practice for a few years to really learn what the needs are. And what you learned and your mentor, your role model in residency or fellowship, your practice will definitely be a little bit different based on just what the community needs are. And so I think that's the key. You don't want to close any door. The only thing you can do wrong right now is just close those doors. Don't learn that particular training. You always, just a sports analogy, you always hear about the guy who's recruited to play quarterback, but the next thing you know, he's a wide receiver and he's an all-star. You don't know what potential you have in there, but you can certainly close off the doors to that potential by just having a singular kind of tunnel vision mindset on what your practice is going to be like.
How do you interface with referring providers?
So I will give referring docs my cell phone number, and I will tell them that if they have a question or if they need me, to please give me a call. Instead of having them go through my office, I make sure that they have a personal connection to me, and that I'm available to them when they need me.
Dr. Ravi.
I think that's the most important thing here. That personal connection which you build, but texting, or whether it's when a few doctors are WhatsApping, they're younger doctors, immediately when the patient comes in, I send them a note. Afterwards, send them a note if there's a problem with the surgery or not. I send them a note, and I still send a formal letter, but that's just for their chart. And that just puts me on a very, very intimate level with them.
I agree, and I think mutual respect is very important. To have great respect, not just for their knowledge base, but their involvement and their real vested interest in their patient. Because after all, especially if we're talking about optometric network, they're really vested in the patient's eye health and has been, they've been the person's doctor for many, many years. So it's really important to respect that, take advantage of your expertise, surgical expertise, and make sure that that patient goes back to that doctor and keep that communication open.
What about you, Dr. Tao?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the letter. Our institution doesn't like us to text. There's all this HIPAA, Nazis around, sorry. They basically, letters are powerful. I copy anybody and their grandmother who ever saw this patient, and I just drop a last paragraph. People outside of ophthalmology don't know what oculoplastic surgery is, so I used to drop a line. We are always available for your orbit, eyelid, lacrimal, left upper lid, right upper lid, this restricted lash, that, and you basically have to just declare what you're available for. The interesting thing I would find, people would call and embarrassed to refer a patient for tearing or something. I'm like, of course, that's what I do. That's what oculoplastic does, and they don't know. We assume they do, but they don't, so get the word out.